Hello, everyone. I'm Anthony Giuliano, and this is the Asher Marketing Podcast. My guest this week is Carly Myers with the Embassy Theater. Carly, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Well, it sounds like things are rolling a little bit more back to normal at the Embassy. You just had a couple big announcements. Are you able to share those with our listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. So yesterday we announced that on sale this Friday is John Crist, who is a comedian that's really kind of getting his tour all set up through this Friday's announce on his own site with his own team. And then we have Joe Bonamassa that's coming this fall as well. And we were kind of working to wait and see until he could make a full tour announcement. He's got some summer shows too, but he's doing a full tour. And so we are definitely feeling the coming out of the pandemic, kind of the impact right now. Everyone has tons of holds on our calendar. And right now we're just starting to finalize a lot of those holds and get things either re-announced, rescheduled, or a lot of people are coming to us that that didn't have holds on the calendar, but that are eager to get out in venues and perform live again.
Well, great. Well, that's great news. And there's a lot of pent-up demand on both sides for people to perform and for those of us who don't perform to go see performers.
Yes.
So that's great. Well, awesome. Well, thanks for joining us. As you know, on this podcast, we talk about marketers and their career path. We talk about the organizations they work for, and then some of the projects that you're involved in. So I want to start with career path because you've had a pretty varied career path,
yes,
as a lot of our guests have,
Sure.
Working for institutions in financial services, doing work in the insurance world, and now for an entertainment venue. So let's start at the beginning, whatever that is for you. You mentioned before we hit record that you grew up in Fort Wayne. So take us through how you went from, let's start with college to where you are today. I know that's a winding path, but tell the story however you'd like to tell it.
Right. Yeah. So in school, I was fortunate to have a pretty good education in Fort Wayne through what were called the magnet programs in Fort Wayne at the time.
Yep.
At Weiser Memorial Park. Went through the honors program at Wayne and felt I was a really good student, very academically focused. But once I got to my college goals, I had a lot of opportunities to go abroad and definitely had the grades and kind of the academic history to be able to do what I wanted to do. But I was a very practical person paying my way through college on my own and realized once I went down and did some tours of even Indiana University and some Indiana-based institutions that actually at the time, IPFW had a really good English staff. And I was pretty impressed with some of the people they had on in their tenure. So I decided to at least start here and kind of I took some really interesting electives through college to just make sure that I was on the right path. But I landed on English, specifically rhetoric, composition, and linguistics, because I knew how important just communication and the foundation of being able to communicate, whether it's visually in writing, however, was really important to be a foundation for any career. And I was really good at it. And I had a penchant for not only being a good creative writer, but a good technical writer. I did journalism stuff in high school. So I really wanted to hone in on that and had some great professors and got that degree.
So do any of the names of those who you worked with there in terms of faculty, does anyone come to mind? I want to see if they're any of the same folks who I had classes with.
Well, George Calamaris is amazing, and Marianne Kane, of course. Larry Friedman was on at the time, and I had Larry for not only literature and some writing stuff, but film courses as well. And he was really tough, but I really clicked with the way he taught. So I did a lot of stuff and had some great classes over at Cinema Center with him. And kind of those are the three that really made an impact. George made a huge impact on me because I've always been a really dedicated student and just somebody that still just yearns to learn every day. And he had tough requirements.
Sure.
And he didn't let students off the hook. He pushed you. And I look back on some of the writing I did even in college from a creative perspective, and it's still some of the best stuff I've ever done.
Yeah, I know George, but I never took one of his classes. I heard really great things about him. Marianne was actually one of the people on my thesis committee and was great
Oh,
to
yeah.
work with.
Yeah, she's great.
She helped me with that despite my efforts to not help myself. She did a great job getting me through that. Well, take us from, so you finished with a degree in English. I'm an
Yep.
English major myself, so I'm interested in how do you find your first job? Because the thing I learned pretty quickly is that while English prepares you for a lot of things, it doesn't specifically prepare you for anything very specific.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So as I was going through, and I started my master's degree at IPFW, and then there were several staff departures, and there were people I really had planned on seeing that part of my
Sure.
my education through, and I had like one semester that just didn't quite do it for me, and I don't like to waste time.
Yeah.
So for me at the time, I was already working full time and everything, and wanted to kind of get on a path. So I had an opportunity with one of my linguistics professors, Beth Simon, who was amazing too.
Yeah, she was great.
She's great.
I really enjoyed working with her, and never spoke to her again after school was done, but really
Yeah.
enjoyed my experience in her classes.
She's a great linguistics professor, and she came to me and said, I can get you into a graduate program at Yale for linguistics. Would you like to pursue this? I had to do a lot of thinking on that because what an opportunity. She thought I had the chops.
Sure.
And then I started to think realistically and practically because that's a part of me that I can't shake.
Sure.
And knew that it would be really hard to forge a career path with that.
Sure.
So at the time, I was kind of doing all of our young career things that we do, retail, bartending,
Yep.
serving, whatever those jobs are, landscaping, whatever. And I was in retail and got a job at what was at the time Lincoln Investment Management before that piece of the company kind of went away. And from there, I had my sights on getting over into the annuities division where they had a small communications division.
Sure.
And so I kind of put in my effort over LIM, which was a very interesting experience. I'm really glad I had that as my first real professional job. A lot of pressure. I had to deal with a lot of personalities. I had to learn to be a great communicator and project manager on the job right out of the gate. And then I kind of waited to see if there was an opening in another part of the company, specifically looking at communications. And I just waited it out and it came open.
Okay.
And I applied. And what that position allowed me to do was prove that I was a good writer, I was organized as a good project manager. I could think more broadly than just a small project scope, that I could help creatively determine broader strategies for the company at the time, because we did a lot of interesting things in the short time I was in that division.
Yeah.
And so that allowed me to get some real on-the-job experience to prove that utilizing my communications English and just my academic background to be really good. Like I'm a perfectionist by nature, so I could kind of prove that the stuff I learned in college and then the stuff I had learned in my earlier academic career, just kind of the person that I'm cut from. Like I'm saying, it takes initiative.
Yep.
I like to get things done. I like to figure out solutions, problem solve. I was able to do all of that there, and I was able to work from, at the time, everybody from Gabe Shaheen, who was at the top, all the way down to people in the lunchroom, and just like the whole diverse set of people there in lots of different ways. So it was a good way of teaching myself how to figure out how to communicate and do a really good job in a lot of different types of projects.
Sure. So how did you make the jump? Because it was a little bit of a challenge for me. I came out of school saying, I'm a good writer, but I was a good writer for college classes. Then I get into the workplace and I'm like, wait a minute, workplace communication is completely different.
Very different.
And today it's one of the things that I take pride in is my ability as a writer for the workplace. It's pretty tight, it's pretty to the point.
Yep.
But I had to relearn how to write. Did you have that experience? And if so, how did you overcome that?
Sure. Yeah. The one thing that was really stands out, even that was many years ago, was that we were writing. There was days in Lincoln in the annuities division where I was writing for 8 or 10 hours straight.
Wow.
So whether it was for our employee newsletter, whether it was for stuff for HR that we were trying to, they had a legal, our legal team at Lincoln, whether we were looking at short communication bits to put on we had a television, a network television system throughout the buildings, all throughout the whole city, where we had to figure out how to communicate something very, very concisely, very briefly, that somebody would just see when they were walking through the buildings.
Yeah.
Or whether it was something that my boss at the time said, this is something very specific for a sales team or for the president or whoever. I got to practice a lot. So, and I had at the time, I was the least experienced person on the team, and really just have always been very open to criticism. My parents taught me that. Other people in my life taught me that.
Yeah.
And so, when I would do stuff, I would really focus on doing it well, but then hand it off to somebody, get it redlined back, even if it looked like a bloodbath, sit there and figure out how to adjust things. And with having that open-minded, nature, I was able to adapt quickly to be able to write specifically for that kind of environment.
Yeah. Well, it is a leap, and that criticism you talked about is a really important piece. I remember, after doing well in classes as a writer, I would give stuff for people to read after college, and it would come back redlined. And my attitude was how dare you criticize my writing? I'm a great writer. And someone said to me, they said, listen, do you want feedback, or do you want me to say it's great? Because it's not. And if you learn how to take criticism, you're going to get better. And that was a hard lesson for me to learn, but one that still sticks with me to this day.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was something else too in college. I tried to diversify my English, the classes I took. I really tried to do that with intention, knowing that, even though my specialty was surrealist poetry, that was not going to apply in the workplace at all.
Sure.
Now, there are elements of what that is all about that certainly do. I can always make leaps. But, I wanted to make sure that I didn't look like I had just come out of college, that I had some, I felt at least a little comfortable with doing some professional writing.
Yeah.
And I also did a few projects for people that were already out in the workplace, just took it on myself and said, hey, let me get, you can either use it or not, but let me practice. Yeah. So I just kind of took those things on myself.
Yeah. Okay. So after Lincoln, where do you go from there?
So I got offered a job kind of out of the blue. Somebody knew somebody who knew me that said, hey, Civic Theater, you're looking to really change a lot right now. It was at a very critical time for the Civic, a lot of leadership changing. Philip Kohlglaser was just coming on board in the leadership role there. And he was looking to hire a few people in at the time to kind of make some significant changes. And he heard about me and reached out to me and said, would you be interested in coming on and being our director of marketing? And at the time I was actually very humbled because I don't know that I felt fully qualified to do that.
Sure.
But also it's nonprofit. I know resources are thin. I know that the people that he had interacted with knew kind of what I was made of and knew that I love a challenge. So the fact that there was a lot of foundation to be made there at the time and a lot of learning to do. And I met with them and we just kind of had we clicked pretty well. And he said, I'm focused on so much other stuff for this organization. I need people I don't have to babysit. Yeah. And I told him one of the things that he would get with me is somebody that was self-sufficient.
Sure.
And that I would only pull him in when I felt like it was really necessary. And my maturity always has helped me in these situations. So I don't think I came across as somebody that didn't have tons of experience. And I kind of laid the groundwork for a lot of key projects I did at Lincoln that were fairly impressive for being early in my career. And he said, yeah, let me make you an offer. And they made an offer and I jumped into the nonprofit game.
Okay. So how long were you there and what was that like?
So I was there for a little over a year and it was just incredible. There were days where I was there for 20 hours.
Oh, wow.
I'm not joking.
Wow.
It was an intense little over a year because I loved what I was doing. It was really interesting. I wasn't a drama kid in high school or anything like that. So actually just watching kind of entertainment unfold on a local level like that was really amazing to be a part of. I felt like I came in, I helped rebrand. I set the tone for some really new things. We had some really incredibly damaged relationships with the media at the time.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Like I had people that would hang up on me, wouldn't even take my call.
Okay.
And my interpersonal skills are I think, one of my strong suits. So I sat there and thought, I got to fix this.
Yeah.
And so I took on some kind of big task where there's been some damage done at the time, for whatever reasons. That's not for me to judge or now or then.
Sure.
And I was like, you know what? There's just problems to fix here.
Yeah.
And by the end of my tenure, I felt like in a good place. I had worked really hard for that year plus to like get things back on track and to kind of prove that we were doing great work and that Philip's tenure was going to be, a great time for the Civic. And, but it was incredibly long days and I was hardly at home at all.
Sure. And that doesn't work for very long.
That doesn't.
Yeah. So what's the next step after that?
So then I went to, I kind of stayed in nonprofit for a while. So I liked being able to be a part of something community oriented. I thought the Civic was important because I'm a fan of the arts. It's in my blood. And I got approached by the Girl Scouts of Limberlost Council,
Okay.
Which looks a lot different nowadays than it did back then because it's gone through a lot of evolution.
Sure.
And they did not have a marketing person in-house. They outsourced a lot of stuff and they were in a real transition when I met with the executive director at the time and she said, I think we want to bring this in-house. We're not sure. What would you think about coming over to the council and doing it like for a while? Like, let's just say 6 months to a year and then allowing all of us to reevaluate. That was a little scary at the time because I didn't like the kind of, this may not be a permanent thing. But I thought highly of what the council was about. It was very successful. I believe it's still successful council. And I thought that I had the ability to make an impact there and it was going to offer a little bit more life balance, work-life balance. So I was there. And then at the end of that tenure, they decided they didn't want to have it in-house.
Okay.
And it had nothing to do with kind of, we parted on really good terms.
Yeah.
It was more, there was just a structure. The structure was odd.
Yeah.
I was also managing the retail operations at the time and the grant writer and some things that while they could inherently fall under marketing, it was a little bit, it was different,
Sure.
And I wanted to spend honestly a little bit more of my time focused on marketing and branding, managing a retail staff, managing the grant writer who I really needed to give more time and effort to. It wasn't, I was spending my time doing a lot of stuff that really wasn't stuff I don't want to say I'm not enjoying, but it wasn't where I wanted to focus my efforts.
Well, and sometimes just because you're good at something doesn't mean you want to do it. So
That's right.
That's right.
Yeah.
All right. So where do we go from there?
So then I went to the Parkview YMCA and was there for a few years while that Y had just opened up.
Yeah.
It was brand new. Christian Riesberg was he was my boss at the time there. He had gotten my resume, and this is a word of advice for people out there because this still happens, and this has happened to me too in recent years. I had sent my resume into him while I was at the Civic because I knew that I couldn't sustain that workload, and he had my resume for over a year before he reached out to me, and he had. They had hired from within for a position. The person just didn't work out. And then he kind of reached out to me right about the time all the Limberlost stuff kind of shifted. And I knew that I was going to have to find something and said, hey, I know I didn't contact you back when you were submitted, but would you like to have a conversation? And I said, sure. And so I went there. And that was a bit of a different marketing role. Very interesting. Another role where I learned a lot about how I wanted to spend my time in a leadership role. So it was very grassroots marketing in that area of the city. So, we were going out into additions in that part of town, other local businesses up on that side of the town, and trying to figure out ways of collaborating to support each other, get more business for each other. But then I managed a team of as many as 28 people and as few as about 20 to 22 people.
Okay.
And those were all membership services focused on the member experience, making sure that they knew how to do everything from give a proper tour to do all of the financial stuff on the front end, to adhere to a lot of policies that a lot of people don't know are at the Y. So, we had people we had to deal with everything from gang activity. We were the ones that generally called the cops when things got,
wow.
we had a lot of situations and in which when you're dealing with the public and things get out of hand, you got to deal with crisis.
Sure.
So we had to deal with all those kinds of things. And I had to really fine tune my management abilities there because I had 28 people to deal with. And that was a lot. It was really fun, but a lot of them are part-time and you get you get different levels of commitment and have to kind of navigate through all that.
Yeah. So another learning experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So then what next?
So then I decided I needed to take a break from nonprofit, as we all have to kind of evaluate at times in our career. And there was some Christian moved on from the Y, and he had been in this area for a long time. And the management structure at the Y changed significantly. And I found myself in a position to have to find a job. Yep. And so I did some freelance work during that time. And then I kind of, about 3 months into my job search, it was a little less than 3 months, I had a friend reach out to me that had done some work with me from a freelance capability when I was still employed full time. And she said, I don't know if this is the right kind of employer for you. She's like, because it's conservative, it's over an hour away from you. There's like a lot of things that you may or may not like about it. It may not be the kind of industry you want to be in. But she said, but I could tell you would love working for who would be your boss.
Okay.
And so I met with John Boggs, who is actually now the mayor of Portland, Indiana. Okay. And he had been at DRG for a long time. And we sat down and had a casual conversation. And that was the first time that during a job interview, I was brutally honest and said, these are my concerns. I don't know that I'm the right fit for you. Yeah. I don't know if I want to travel here all the time. Sure. I really like what I'm seeing with you, but there's some deal breakers here for me.
Sure.
And we had a couple of conversations and he just decided he really wanted me on the team and really said, how do we make this happen? And he was really growing that team at the time, which was all over the country. Okay. So it was a remote team, which was great to experience at that point in my career.
Yeah, sure.
And so I came on board with DRG for a few years and traveled all over the country for them at different trade and customer events and client events. And I worked with a team of salespeople every day to figure out how to take the edge off of their sales, the edge off of their sales personalities, which was very intimidating to a lot of people in the crafting industry. Okay. And figure out a way of genuinely and authentically showing how our products were a good fit for people. And so I worked with them and kind of created all these mini marketing plans for all these people. And sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. But our team did really well the whole time I was there. And I was really proud of kind of everything we achieved.
All right. So you're up front and helped your boss understand, here's the kind of risk you're going to be taking if you hire me, which is, it's always a risk, right?
Yep,
if you're not up front, you're taking another kind of risk.
Yeah.
So sounds like you have a good boss, you're in a good situation there, but you decide to do something else. What led to that change and where'd you go from there?
Sure. So change is something I've gotten used to. So at DRG, our division was very financially sound. Yeah. But the organization decided to outsource it entirely. Okay. So a company in New York, they outsourced it to, and everyone in our division lost a job. And I was the last person standing. They kept me for the longevity. I kind of knew a lot about the division, so felt like that was part of the reason why I got the luxury of having a little more time than other people. Sure. And I'd worked with everyone all over the country very closely. And at that point, I was sitting there, and this is right when the economy hit. This was right in the heart of everything in that era. And so I dove back into freelance work. Actually did pretty well during that time because people were more willing to pay a freelancer than actually hire somebody on to do marketing work. Sure. So I was able to keep myself sustained. But one of the things that during that time was that I live on the northeast side of Irving. I had driven by MedPro almost daily for years and years. And I knew what MedPro was. And I kind of casually kept my eye out because I thought it was a really interesting company for a lot of reasons. Yeah. And So I kind of been just keeping my eye out, and very seldom do opportunities come up there in the marketing area.
Sure.
And one just by happenstance came up while I was doing some freelance projects, and I said, I'm going to apply. And then I spent several years at MedPro.
Okay.
And one of the most valuable employment experiences of my career by far.
So why is that? How would you summarize that?
I really thrive in an environment where I can critically think a lot. And I was tasked with helping manage the marketing for a significant part of the country. Every state was different because of the liability industry is different in every state, the med mal industry. So the laws and the things that affect Indiana don't affect Colorado or California the same way. It's a very complex industry. I worked with lawyers on a daily basis, became very tight with the legal team there because what we did, one error on my part, and collectively on the company's part, if we put something out that was, defamatory or a problem in the industry from a litigious perspective, I mean, we could get a $250,000 fine like that.
Wow.
Or $1 million fine.
Yeah, sure.
So we had to be incredibly careful about how we did everything. And I like thinking about all the spokes on the wheel, thinking about the facets of what you're doing, making sure that you're still being competitive and accurate in your kind of your marketing assets, but also I got very comfortable with that team on making sure that we didn't step over the line, but getting very close to the line. And it was just critical thinking a lot, which I love. And I like to, I just like to mull things over. I like to have a problem and go home at night and think about it and figure out the best way to represent the company in doing it. And that was a daily thing at MedPro.
Okay. All right. So from there you go to IAB.
Yep. So
how does that switch happen?
So I was at MedPro, and I just at the time I didn't feel like there was a lot of changes going on with the people I was working with. I wasn't feeling quite as utilized as I wanted to, but I would have been happy to stay at MedPro for longer. What happened was a recruiter came to me.
Okay.
It was accidental. Somebody approached me and said, we had a common contact, and they said, "Are you looking to move?" And I said, "Not really, but I would be open to talking to you." And a recruiter said, "We have a position in banking. You would have a team," which I did not have at MedPro. And one thing I was kind of interested in having was developing a team. And not the size of team I had at the Y. But like having like a really tight marketing team. That was something that I was hoping to do at MedPro and just kind of never got there. And so kind of worked through the recruiter. That process actually went really well. I met who would be my boss at IEB. Loved that me and her were very different people, but we had incredible respect for each other. And I thought that we would dynamically work well together because she was looking, the vacancy that I was filling, somebody had been in that role for like 18 years.
Oh, wow.
And Karen was looking to have some creative change. And she met me, and like I said, we were very different, but we just, opposites attract. And I liked her, she liked me. I brought some real ideas to the table in my interviews, and we had long interviews. We had like 3-hour interviews with each other. Wow. And then when I met my team there, I immediately knew this might be something great. And I had such a great team there that had things not changed for IAB, I would still be there. Okay. So it was I had a designer and a project manager on my team, and we just every day we did incredible work, day in and day out. It was a very fulfilling experience with actually the amount of stuff we did during our tenure there, because we just cranked out an enormous amount of work for all of these branches.
And IAB was the result of a merger with a couple of banks, correct?
So it had the history. It was it came together, Grable and some other stuff, and then we had been acquiring banks when I was there, small banks, just it wasn't an entity looking to go around and do gigantic buys. It was looking to acquire as it made sense. So there's a bank in Bourbon, Indiana that we acquired and things like that. And then there was a stock situation that came up, and all of a sudden we we were getting acquired. And our team and kind of a lot of the employees that ended up being kind of casualties of that, we were on still for a while after we found out about everything.
Sure.
So there was a good 8 months there where we were all retained and kind of working with first merchants to try to make sure that the transition was smooth, and which I appreciate because it was two organizations trying to really work together for the best of the customer, for the best thing for the customer. So yeah.
So you have a pretty decent history of being there to turn the lights off.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about where you are today, which is you go from there to the embassy.
Yeah.
And I think most people know what the embassy is. But let's talk about your role and what the embassy has experienced over the past 14 months. Before we hit record, you were talking about the fact that the embassy never really shut down, although things were very different. So talk us through, if you don't mind, for those who might not know, how do you describe the embassy, and then what have the last 14 months or so been like?
Sure. Yeah. And it's crazy to me how, especially people who are local that have been here, born and raised here, how many people have not been to the embassy. So the embassy is a theater that was founded in 1928. It is a historic icon in downtown Fort Wayne. We are a venue with an amazing stage on it, and we can seat about 2,500 people, 2,471 actually. And so we're this historic theater that ended up getting saved by the community in the 70s too, from the wrecking ball. Amazing story of community perseverance to save a historic icon, which is it's really incredible to be a part of that because the community loves the embassy.
Sure.
But also, we acquired the Indiana hotel side of the actual building a few years ago. We actually restored it all. And so we had this big space over there. Some of the area in there, especially the Indiana hotel side, a lot of people have never even been in.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a ballroom, we have a rooftop patio, we have all this rental space for events and small and large. And just this amazing theater that brings in all these rentals from national tours, like things that everyone is, familiar with, like your Seinfelds and big bands and stuff like that. But also we are a nonprofit, and a lot of people lose sight of that or don't know that about the embassy. So we have a commitment to serve the community too. So we do a lot. We have a full education program. During COVID, we have connected with a lot of local nonprofits because we have the luxury of space. Mm-hmm. So, once all of this happened last year, and everyone was on lockdown there for those few weeks that were mandatory, literally the week we came home, we all set up Zoom, we got it all situated, and we figured out how are we gonna do this? Mm-hmm. Because one of the things about Kelly Updike and really the whole team is that we don't like to quit anything.
Sure.
Like we're not only an adaptive team, but we are a team that wants to try to figure out how to not say no to things or not be bullied by a situation like this. Sure. Where everyone was closing their doors. All the venues all over the country and world were closing their doors. And we were like, what can we do? How can we think this through? And we started to think, well, if we can work with the Board of Health and we provide plans to them that they're comfortable with, then why don't we just do really small events and work with nonprofits and other community partners to be able to host their events if they need that space? Because a lot of their home venues, they couldn't do it because of that. And we have an operations officer that's incredible, and she just quickly figured out how we were going to abide by all the guidelines, the health guidelines, how we were going to ensure that I could tell the public that you can come here if you choose to, and feel and we didn't use the word safe, but feel like your exposure is as little as possible.
Sure.
And we're going to do events that normally you'd have hundreds of people, and we're going to cap them at 48.
Sure. So a couple of questions. Was there any negative publicity with that? Was there any pushback on that? Because obviously it's been a contentious issue regardless of, what position you take.
Yes.
And, tell me a little bit about that and then what type of events you successfully were able to host.
Sure. We did get pushback. I would say we got a lot more positivity from our supporters and from the community. It was funny for a while there, the media was contacting me like almost weekly, saying we can't believe that you guys are making this happen. Like you're making it go.
Sure.
And it was mainly because we just, like I said, we don't have the I'm gonna quit or give up in our blood. So, summer night started last year. We started a couple weeks late. We did virtual the first two. We adapted to a bunch of virtual stuff throughout all of this as well. But we went to the health department, and Mary Jo was working closely with them because we had to get everything approved. And they said, yeah, you can do it. You just can't have more than 48 people. And so we just had events with 48 people.
Well, it's a largely outdoor event, correct?
It's indoor, outdoor. So we have the rooftop patio, but it's hosted in the ballroom.
Okay.
But the ballroom is large. So, that's a large space for weddings and stuff.
Sure.
So you're used to having your receptions with 350 people in there.
Yep.
And if we have to figure out how to spread out and place 48 people, and that was including staff. So we just figured out how to do these micro events, really. And then throughout the summer, we did some films in our auditorium because we can seat 2,500 people. So we can spread everyone out.
Yep.
Our box office immediately figured out how to seat socially distance, figured out how to, our cleaning crew, which we have Blue Jacket, who's our cleaning crew, just hunkered down and figured out how to do everything from a sanitization perspective, how we do things without intermission so that we don't have to constantly, like we had just all these operational things in place.
Sure.
We had, ingress and egress was different. We had one-way traffic patterns. We stopped doing high-touch things like some of the concession stuff. We just figured out how to eliminate the risks and how to figure out how to do the stuff we could do. And so as we moved through the summer and did summer nights, we hosted like the Summit City Vocal Classic in August. We had films, like I said, in August, silent films. We went into the fall we did Hobnobbin. That was Cinema Center didn't know how to do it because they couldn't.
Sure.
So we're like, well, let's talk. Let's make this happen. And they're bringing it back again this year, which is amazing. We worked with Three Rivers Music Theater, who we're working with on an event later in June, so that they could host an event in October. We hosted a couple of Embassy Presents shows that we bought ourselves that we thought, we can do this and handle this because we can control attendance and we can control how it goes. And then the big kicker was, are we going to do Festival of Trees? Normally, we see about 23,000 people. And we knew that there was no way this was going to look normal, but we had the Festival of Trees, which to me is, when I look back, I'm still kind of in awe that we were able to pull that off.
So how many people went through it in 2020?
So I believe it was about 6,000 people total.
Okay.
But we doubled the length of it. We opened it up earlier. We had it open longer. We had everyone, if you bought a ticket, it was good for your hour. So, and we had our traffic pattern, which was actually really nice. It wasn't as kind of stilted and stuff as you might think, but people really enjoyed kind of the path that we made so that people could spread out. We eliminated things like, we had some dedicated photo opportunities where people could stop and take photos, but we tried to kind of keep people moving. And then the big thing, it's something like that every year is like, we always have stage activity and we always have Santa. And the stage activity, we decided, even though we kept working it through, that it was going to be too hard to do.
Sure.
So we said, this year we have to be practical and we have to not do it. However, like with Santa, we kept thinking, how do we do Santa? So we did a virtual Santa.
Okay.
And people that came through the festival were incredibly thankful. And we had almost as many trees as we normally have. And it was incredible.
So was it a situation where you learned some things that you'll keep moving forward, or you think you're going to go back to 100% the way you used to do it?
Both.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the great outcomes of the last 14 months. Obviously, there's been a lot of bad over the last 14 months, but one of the things that I think everyone's learned, whether or not you're a marketer, is there's some things we've learned to do that actually should stay, and some ways we used to work that maybe should have never been there in the first place.
Absolutely. So, one of a key example of that is that we two things quickly. So we have decorators come in, and it's a very coordinated it's like a ballet. That week of Festival Trees opening is just to watch it is really interesting. So you have to have the decorators come in just a couple days before opening and basically make it into a magical winter wonderland.
Sure.
And that had been an incredibly stressful essentially day and a half in the old pre-pandemic Festival of Trees experience. Last year, we had to spread it out so that we can only have so many people in the building at any given time.
Sure.
And it worked out so much better.
Yeah.
Just we had to think about it all very differently, but everyone, the decorators, getting the trees put up, our staff, it just, the stress levels were much lower because it wasn't kind of that mad rush to get it all done.
Sure.
And then you always have issues with things breaking and not, lights not turning on and all this stuff you have to troubleshoot quickly. So that is something that I know that our team is going to retain. And then also something as simple as a printed program. I would, print, tens of thousands of them, and then at the end of the day, they most of them just get thrown out, not even properly recycled. And we decided after last year, a digital program is just fine. We had our People's Choice voting and our voting for different trees. We did that all digitally, and we did not feel that the loss of the number of people that didn't choose to do it because just because it wasn't a paper thing, it equaled out to be just fine. We didn't feel like we had a lot of people that just didn't want to do it because of that.
Sure. It seems like anything that was kind of on the bubble got pushed into, a new way of doing it.
100%.
So tell me about some of the major projects. What's taking up your time? What's taking up your headspace? What's keeping you up at night? What's getting you excited? Maybe a combination of all those things. What are some of the projects that you're working on right now?
So right now we have our fiscal year. Our fiscal year starts September 1st. So during the summer, starting in about May, we always get very feverish about how we're going to tackle the next calendar year or the next fiscal year for us. And so right now, I'm spending my time on a few things. One is getting back into reacclimating to the full swing of a lot of activity in the building. Everyone is, it's really starting to feel like we're getting into it again.
Sure.
And that kind of just getting everyone in the groove of coming back, making sure that we find the communication balance with people, because before the pandemic, we were communicating with our patrons, members, the community, media in a certain kind of frequency. And then of course, everything got saturated. And everyone's zoned out during the pandemic, and it just became too much. So then it was trying to figure out, how do we communicate? When do we communicate? Why do we communicate? So now I'm having to readjust how I interact on behalf of the embassy with people, because people are now more discriminating about what they want to see when they want to see it. And so we're having to make adjustments with that. And I love communications, directing communications thing. That's something that's kind of in my blood. So trying to figure out how to strike that balance I'm working on that for next year. Also, I'm looking at doing a total web redo, which is going to be a major project because we have back-end API stuff from Ticketmaster and other things. And it's just, I want to make it really user-friendly, and that's going to be a big project. And because everything is very active and we're always having a lot of change on the site because of our activities in the building, that's exciting, and it will take a little while to do, but I'm hoping to do that in 2022. But there's a lot of work to be done to get there. And really just developing a team, which when I came on board with Kelly, I told her that, this is not a one-person operation at the embassy. This has to be, there has to be multiple people on the marketing team. And for many years, it was, it's been that way. And it was time for growth of that when I came on board. And then, I got into the groove, kind of figured out what I wanted to do with a team. And then we got hit with the pandemic. So now it's just how do I develop a marketing staff and kind of marketing resources going forward to figure out how to move us kind of in the direction that I know that we need to go, and kind of our whole senior team and just the team in general knows we need to go.
So it sounds like a lot of different things taking up your time. It's just a matter of prioritizing them. All right. Well, I'm going to turn to what I call the speed round of the show, where we talk through 3 questions similar to some of the things we've talked about, but with more pithy, concise answers. First one is about career path. You've obviously done a lot of different things.
Sure.
You came from a writing background and have parlayed that into a more broad career in marketing. What's the best lesson you've learned about success in a career or building a career path or finding your way? What's the thing you would share with someone who maybe wasn't sure what they wanted to do or was contemplating a job change? What would you say to them?
I would say be humble, jump in, and just start digging into things, and really kind of take initiative to get in the middle of the mess of things. I think that I learned early on in my career to just dive in, and then usually it gets sorted out pretty quickly. Like at Lincoln, it got sorted out pretty quickly where I was going to spend my time. But I also kind of dabbled in a lot of the stuff our team did, and be an action figure is like what I would say as like a mantra.
All right.
To just like make sure that you can show that you're doing things and the results of what you do.
Okay. All right. Really good advice. So let's talk about the embassy for a second. I'll give you a choice here, a couple different ways you could answer this question. One option is, how would you describe the embassy to someone if you only had 30 seconds? Or is there a myth or a misconception about the embassy that you'd like people to better understand?
I would say the thing with the embassy that I hear over and over from people that I want to make sure people understand, it is a place where you go to experience art, and make memories. And that might sound a little cheesy, but when I talk to patrons and members and donors and sponsors, there are incredible memories that are had in our building, because not only is it this historic, beautiful place, but, there are experiences that people have never had, that, whether it's somebody that they wanted to see on the stage, or they got married there, or they, spent like a critical time with a friend at an event there, or they came and saw a community related, project there. And so I think it's a place where you get to experience things and it sticks with you for life. So it's not a casual thing. When you walk through the doors, it has a certain kind of magic behind it.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, before I ever took this job, one of my most incredible musical things in Fort Wayne as far as seeing a band happened when I got a lone empty seat on the front row of the embassy by kind of accident. And I went to a concert by myself there. And to this day, I can still remember everything about it because it was incredible.
What was the concert, if you don't mind my
It was
asking?
Ben Folds with the Philharmonic.
Okay. All right.
It was just an incredible show from start to end, and the music was amazing, and the sound, and the experience of everyone around me.
Yeah. Well, and I certainly have experienced that. I remember when my son was very young, everything from, we went to see Bear in the Big Blue House at the embassy, but we also went to the first couple down the line shows.
Oh, yeah.
And, he was very young, but really, I think it gave him an appreciation for music that he might not have had otherwise.
Absolutely.
Saw Seinfeld there a couple times,
Yep.
obviously a different experience. But
Sure.
yeah, a lot of those touchstone moments, you remember the experience, and part of that's the venue. And obviously part of it is the talent, but
Yep.
the venue makes a great impression too.
That's right.
All right, one more, and I'm going to mix this one up a little bit. So you were able to persevere pretty well through the pandemic and make work during that
Yep.
time. What are some of the lessons beyond maybe, some of the things you mentioned with Festival of Trees, but what are some of the lessons that you learned during that time that you think will stay with you moving forward?
I think at the end of the day, and this is not necessarily specific to the pandemic, but it is, because we focused on a lot. I think that when you focus on quality and excellence and being attentive to your patrons and your customers, whatever you call them, and delivering like a genuine experience for people, they will stick with you through thick and thin. And we had a lot of people reach out to us during the pandemic that wondered how we were going to survive or how we were surviving. And I think that what we did was we just continued to focus on excellence. And when we worked with a partner, be it Cinema Center or, our own events, or like a Summit City Vocal Classic, or we also worked with a a theater out of Indianapolis as well. We don't do anything halfway at the embassy. We really focus on doing it right. And that's kind of the whole experience. What you're going to see at the end of the day when it's live, and kind of the way we interact with people as partners getting up to that live event. And so I think that excellence kind of differentiates you and wins the day. And I think that if you can maintain that during times of crisis, that's going to make you stand out, and it's going to help you feel really good about what you're getting through.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times, there's a lot of, granted, during the pandemic, everyone emotionally felt a variety of things, and it was just a matter of having a team dynamic that allowed us to always focus on how we were going to do things really well, and that we were going to get through it, and we were going to come out with a lot of lessons learned.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, certainly we've all experienced that. And I think we're now just gaining an understanding for what we collectively and individually went through. And
Yes.
hopefully it makes us a little stronger moving forward.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Carly, thank you so much for joining us.
Sure.
And thanks to all of you who took the time to listen to this week's episode. We'll be back next week with another great guest, and we hope you'll join us then.